We know that in Chicago right now, ICE raids are happening again. Families are being separated from one another. Workers are disappearing from job sites overnight and seeking to evade arrest and detainment. This is not just an immigration issue. Because sometimes when people think about immigration, they just think about, okay, well, what does the law say? Are you allowed to be in the country? Or are you not allowed to be in the country? But when we think about the economics of where people live, we know that the economic issue is a lot more nuanced than that. Because when fear takes over a community, the economy doesn't just slow down, it stops in place. Today, we're talking about the cost of ICE raids on Econ Club, which is the first finance club for the 99%. If you're interested in learning more about finance and economics, through the lens of everyday life, the things that happen to us, the things that we experience every day, this is the channel for you. So hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you know exactly when I'm posting new shorts, long form videos, and announcements about our Patreon community over at patreon.com/econ club. So we can't separate numbers from people. Now, there's some positive economists who would tell you that we can separate numbers from people. A positive economist means it's a person who's only looking at data and numbers, but who is not talking about data and numbers through the lens of their opinion, which I have some qualms about that definition because no individual, no human being on earth is purely objective. But just to give you sort of a high level definition, and then there are normative economists. Normative economists is someone who is looking at the data. They are looking at the numbers, but then they're also thinking about the kinds of outcomes that potentially we want to bring about in our society to make our society better. There's some value judgments involved in that. It's not just looking at the numbers because numbers are a direct representation of what is happening with people. They're a direct representation of what is happening in people's lives. Let's talk about Chicago's local economy because we know that the National Guard has been sent to Chicago. We know that there have been numerous videos and images that have been circulating across social media showing people of color being detained, Alder people being detained, pepper balls thrown into residential communities where there are people who are there with their families, their children, elders, journalists also being detained, journalists having pepper balls being thrown into their cars so they can't appropriately and effectively document what is happening. When we think about Chicago's local economy, it's important for us to consider working class labor. For a long time across social media, and maybe this is still a running joke, I haven't seen it in a minute. There's this running joke about okay boomer, right? So like, okay, the boomer generation, we are mad at you all for how you have poorly managed our government and our country. So when you try to give us advice, it just feels very much like, hey, just go out and get a job, and then just go out and buy a house, and then just go and have a family, and then just go and pay your bills and live life, without really considering that the context of what that means in this society has changed considerably. That's where we kind of get that okay boomer of like, you're being dismissive, so I'm also going to be dismissive in return and say okay boomer. But we think about Chicago's local economy, let's talk about working class labor. So we're talking about kitchens, we're talking about warehouses, we're talking about childcare, we're talking about construction, we're talking about logistics. Now, no generation, did you know, since baby boomers have had as many children. So that means that we had all these babies that were born during the boomer generation. We had all these jobs that were being filled by baby boomers. And now we have a number of baby boomers that are retiring or approaching very quickly retirement age. But we do not have enough people in the United States to fill those jobs. And income's what? To kind of help to save the local economy, because if we have a number of jobs that we cannot fill, that cannot be automated, we can't just throw chat GPT at everything, as you know. We don't have the people to actually do the jobs. That means that what we're going to experience is a major shortfall in our GDP. So that's money that basically is documented by the US government that is changing from one hand to the other. We're talking about real estate transactions, we're talking about car sales, right? We're talking about people buying food that they need to survive and to thrive in this society. But if we do not have the people that we need to fill those jobs, then we're facing a major shortfall in our GDP. So we actually do need immigration. And there are a number of really critical articles
Thank
about this
you.
where economists are arguing for solutions to find a way to provide the people that are needed so that we can avoid the shortfall. But one of the most common solutions that are being brought up within these economic journals and articles is we need immigration. Because if we do not have immigration, we don't have enough people to actually do the jobs. If we don't have enough people to do the jobs, then that means the current rate at which we are gaining revenue as a country means income tax, because that's the number one way in which our government gains revenue is through income taxes. If we do not have enough people in the jobs, then we're losing not only money, but we're also losing income tax that the government is collecting. If the government is losing income tax, then that means the government, which already operates at a deficit, has even less money to run our country. So this whole attack on immigration, that's one of the reasons why it's so illogical, because we actually need immigration to be able to fill a lot of these jobs, especially when we talk about hospitality, services industry, the construction industry. We need a lot of people to fill these jobs. Think about this from a local economy perspective. We have dozens and dozens of people that are just vanishing overnight that no longer can show up to work because they've been detained, National Guard, or they've been detained by other members of ICE. What happens in a local economy? When ICE raids happen, entire portions of the workforce disappear. That means unfinished projects, disrupted supply chains, and businesses that are suddenly unable to meet the demand. In order to make a profit, they have to meet the demand of their customers and their consumer base. Local GDP, which is the total value of what we produce, like our country has a GDP, but also local economies like states and cities have GDP too, which not to be confused with GPT, chat GPT, but they have GDP, global domestic product, as well, the total value of what we produce. And that drops, not because people don't want to work, but because the people who are doing the work are being disappeared. The loss isn't just in wages. It's that small coffee shop at the end of the block that is no longer able to meet the demand of customers that are keeping that coffee shop and that local business open. It's the daycare that loses trusted staff that are needed to ensure that parents who need to go to work have the best quality childcare available. It's the landlord whose rent can't be paid because their tenants have literally been detained. Every dollar of fear has a ripple effect, and it is detrimental to the ways in which a region like Chicago, a state like Illinois, is able to build the total value of what they produce, which again is really critical, because just like we talked about with the government, within a state government, how do we think a state government, a city, has money for social services? It's through our income taxes, people. It's through our taxes. So even when those taxes go to the federal government, right, states are then receiving money from the federal government that is coming from us because we work, because our wages are taxed. So when that is reduced, the ability that a region like Chicago, a state like Illinois has to be able to take care of its people is also reduced, which, by the way, only has a negative impact on the country as a whole. I'll do another video at a later date where we talk about the actual economic cost of poverty, but because poverty exists, it creates so many other costs within a country, on a local level, on a federal level, and on a global level, that really just keep us spending money, spending money, spending money. And the US has been in a deficit in its spending for a very long time, which is bipartisan, by the way. A deficit in its spending under both red administrations and blue administrations, with red administrations spending more than blue administrations, but both still spending above the amount that we have in revenue. Economists also talk about labor elasticity. That's how flexible a workforce is when conditions change. So can the workforce continue to operate? Can it continue to operate effectively? Just as an example, in theory, if one group of workers disappears, another fills the gap. But that's not how real life works, because we know, according to specific research, that says that some people in a particular role, when they leave, they're leaving with about 45%, at least a 45% minimum of the knowledge they need to be able to work effectively in that role. And especially when they're not leaving of their own accord, but they're being disappeared, that means that all of their knowledge around that specific role, that workforce, is taken away. In addition to the incredibly detrimental impact on their family, their community, their friends, and on their civil rights, and our civil rights as citizens as well, for citizens and other folks who might be undocumented, it impacts us all negatively. And it also is impacting the workforce negatively as well. The truth is, specialized skills and trust take time to build, because people are people. We're not machines. Even if we were talking about an algorithm, being able to develop an algorithm, to design an algorithm to do what you want it to do, takes time and it takes skill. It's not something that just happens on its own. A lot of cause and effect, which again is one of the reasons why hallucinations with generative AI tools like ChatGPT are so dangerous, because even with so many work hours that are being put into building these algorithms, there's still going to be mistakes that are happening. And the only way for those mistakes to be caught is through the labor of people with specialized skills and people who are actually taking the time to not just build the skill that they need to be effective in their job, but also to build trust with the people that they work with. Fear makes the labor market inelastic. That means it makes it rigid because people are withdrawing. People protect themselves, they stop taking risks, they stop moving freely through the economy, they stop spending money, they start being afraid to leave home, they start being afraid to actually go to their neighborhood grocery store, their neighborhood corner store, their neighborhood apparel store because of fear that is being incited by their own government. That rigidity cost us all. It costs us stability, it costs us creativity, and it costs us sustainability. The economy does not run on numbers. It runs on people. Not on Duncan, but it does run on people. But some people might say it runs on Duncan, but you get my point. It runs on people. I was born and raised in Chicago. I remember the tension in neighborhoods when raids were happening. And for me, as a Black American person, my experience with raids is nuanced in that I may not have always experienced a raid that was immigration focused, but I lived in neighborhoods that were highly militarized and still to this day are highly militarized by the Chicago Police Department. So experiencing a raid or seeing a group of people being disappeared, even as a young person in high school and in elementary school, to see people just sort of be rounded up based on this sort of like racialized need to prove dominance is incredibly terrifying and traumatizing. And it breeds distrust in communities, across communities. So there is a financial impact, but then there's also a relational impact because the ways in which we build relationships, we're not just building relationships overnight, but it takes time. And when people are disappeared, it has a major impact on them, their mental and emotional well-being, their spiritual well-being, their physical well-being, and on all the people who know them. It has a negative impact also. These moments that I experienced growing up in Chicago taught me the economy isn't just charts or policy. It's how safe we feel earning, how safe we feel spending our money, how safe we feel budgeting our money. When fear becomes the foundation of the market, trust goes out the window. Without trust, economies collapse from the inside out. Because just think about the US dollar. We believe the United States dollar has value. Why? Because of trust. Because we trust to a certain extent that our government is going to ensure that whatever value of money we have in our bank account is the value of what that money is worth. Even though for decades, it's been decades since we left the gold standard. So our money is no longer backed by gold, it's backed by faith and it's backed by debt, which again, conversation for another day. But just saying, it's backed by faith and it also is backed by debt that we're taking out with other countries. These raids don't just detain people, they stop progress on every level. They ruin lives and families. They disrupt the very networks that keep our cities and our country running and effective. Every detained worker is also a taxpayer. So for some folks who are like, oh, wait, hey, if you're undocumented, you're not paying taxes. Incorrect. Every detained worker is also a taxpayer, a parent, a consumer, and a neighbor. The next time someone says, this doesn't affect me, remember, baby, it does. Already it affects you. We all lose when economies run on fear instead of fairness. If this message resonates, please share it. Subscribe to Econ Club for more content that connects economics to everyday life. And if you'd like to go deeper, become a subscriber on Patreon and download for free Economics of Fear, available for members only on my Patreon, about raids across the United States, especially Chicago, and how they negatively impact our economy. Together, we can build an economy that values people first. Welcome to Econ Club, finance and economics for the 99%.